every person, every creature, every blade of grass. We are kin. There is no one that we do not claim and call our neighbor. In this morning's scripture passage, the Apostle Paul is in the city of Athens. He moves through the city, and what he notices is that there are idols everywhere. Statues dedicated to this god and that god, and even one dedicated in case any god got missed and got upset, to the god that no one knows. And what Paul wants the Athenians to know after he observes this is that the God he is passionate to speak about, that God, the God of all compassion that we just sang about, that God is everywhere present, and that God is a comforting God, the God who created them and the God who taught and lived in Jesus the Christ. That God is immense and intimate and engaged in every facet of their lives. And he wants them to know that God is a movement. I want you to know that God is a movement, not a static idol. Here's what Paul has to say. Paul took his stand in the open space of the Areopagus, and he laid it out for them. This is Eugene Peterson's paraphrase, the message. He said, "It is plain to see that you Athenians take your religion seriously. When I arrived here the other day, I was fascinated with all of the shrines that I came across, and then I found one inscribed, 'To the God nobody knows.' Well, I'm here to introduce you to this God so that you can worship intelligently, knowing who it is you are dealing with. The God who made the world and everything in it. This master of sky and land does not live in custom-made shrines, and God does not need the human race to run errands for God, as if God couldn't take care of itself. God makes the creatures do not make God. Starting from scratch, God made the entire human race and made the earth hospitable with plenty of time and space for living. And not just to grope around in the dark, but to actually find God. God does not play hide and seek with us. God is not remote, God is near. We live and move in God. We cannot get away from God. One of your poets said it well. We are the God created. Well, if we are the God created, it doesn't make a lot of sense to think that we would hire a sculptor to chisel a God out of stone for us, does it? God overlooks it, as long as you don't know any better, but that time is past. The unknown is now known, and God is calling us to a radical life change. May God add a blessing to the reading of this word. All of our lives changed on 9/11. There's something about the light and the way the air feels that reminds me every year. All of our lives changed on 9/11. It was a decades ago act of violence that has lived with us yet. Planes used as bombs shattered any sense that we live in an isolated and sheltered world. And that kind of awareness lives with us yet, does it not? It lives with us even now as we name pain around how violence invades spaces that we hold sacred. Our schools, our homes, our streets. On 9/11, we were, individually and as a world community, we stopped what we were doing and we held vigil. You knew where you were, right? You can remember where you were. Later on that same day, I got a phone call. A family had been visiting the church I was serving, Duluth First United Methodist Church, with their beautiful 10-month-old child, Samuel. He was a beautiful baby boy, and they had prayed and they had longed for Samuel, and they were finally able to adopt him from the country of Colombia, and there was radiated joy in that family when they were in our midst on that day. And that same family called because they had gotten a phone call that no parent wants to receive. Their son had died. Could I come and be with them? Being with people who are grieving is sacred work. And I was grateful that day that they called and that they felt the church was a place where they could turn to. And also, to be honest, I was overwhelmed by the enormity of their loss. In a nation and in a world that was saturated with so much shared grief, their loss was particularly piercing and raw and immediate. And what can anyone say or do in such a time? There is no training that prepares you. So breathing many prayers, as I do whenever I enter a hospital room or this pulpit, I went to their home. They told me, as I sat with them, about how their day had unfolded, and we wept together, and we prayed together, and we began to talk about the incomprehensible, which was funeral plans for Samuel. And when it was time for me to leave their home, I went to the kitchen to leave my coffee cup on the counter, and I happened to glance up above the kitchen sink window, and there were two words that stopped me dead. Those words were this: give thanks. And those two words stopped my breath, because how could two words be so ridiculous at a time like they were experiencing? And those two words gave me a sense of hope, because I knew that Samuel's mom and dad were people who had practiced, who had sought a practice to help them be present to gratitude. Those two words, give thanks, were proclamation. And they were an invocation, a prayer. In the midst of the grief and the pain and the astounding vulnerability it takes to live and to love and to let go in this life that we all live. And those words, I have to tell you, still clearly hold this family. Years after Samuel's death, I get snapshots of their lives via Facebook and Christmas cards. And they have created a rainbow of family, of children who radiate joy and who radiate love. And I know that Samuel remains in their midst as a beloved, as a tangible brother and son in the living of their days. Because they are forever family, woven by the power of resurrection life. practice matters. Practice can sustain us. Today is kickoff Sunday at church. It's an odd day to preach such a heavy story, but the poignancy of ongoing life we share is real. Today is the day when we say with all of the gusto we have that we are connected to each other as kin who share life, whether we are present physically in this sanctuary or whether we are in our living rooms, whether we participate in puppy yoga this morning or sit in the balcony and savor the beauty of space and time to be open to the whisperings of God or our own hearts. We are here, you and I, seeking to remember who we are and what it means to be in the presence of a God who gives us life, the God who gives us September air, the God who gives us, who showers upon us, the kind of love that is relentless and always calling us to unfold into wonder and thanks, or whatever it is we carry. We are here because you choose to be here. I'm so glad you do. So together in this month, what we're looking at is, what is it to be a Methodist? This is a United Methodist Church. What does it mean to be a United Methodist Church? So I'll tell you just a little bit. Nearly 300 years ago, John Wesley was an Anglican priest in England, and he grew up in the church and he followed in his father's footsteps to become a religious professional. And he and his brother Charles went to Oxford, and in their looking for community and meaning, they met other people who were trying to figure out what it means to love God and to love your neighbor as you love yourself. They were desperate to learn how to practice their faith because the world around them was losing its center. Does it sound familiar? A little bit. During the Industrial Revolution, families in England left their farms and they went to the cities, and they were without communal support, and poverty became more and more rampant. So the Wesleys became really tired of people hanging out in beautiful sanctuaries, while around them the world was desperate for hope and compassion and care and justice. So they became tired of talking about faith. They wanted to live faith, and they wanted to live a love with God that would transform their lives. So they focused on practices or methods that would keep them mindful of God's presence. Because of their belief that practice matters, they were called many names. They were called Bible moths. How would you like to have that thrown at you? Horrors. They were called, get this, is there a more awful phrase? They were called enthusiasts. And finally, they were called Methodists, because they believe that relationships, y'all know this in your own lives, right? Relationships, anything we care about, deserve tending and attention and intention, and maybe most especially, our relationship with God and with neighbors, and in particular, and Wesley is clear about this, with the poor. We're going to talk more in the following weeks about the methods practiced by the people called Methodists. I don't want to scoop Laura's sermon. But today I want to underscore one of the bedrock powers of the Methodist movement. We United Methodists name, and we practice, and we believe, and we are enthusiastic about our connection. our connection to God and to each other and to all of creation. United Methodists are a worldwide connection. Next week, you will meet Pastor Judith Gaima, who is a United Methodist, who is leading the school in Baiwala that we help to support in Sierra Leone. We are connected in ministry with kindred in Baiwala and across this world, because what John Wesley taught is the world is our parish. And there is no one who is not our neighbor. Every person, every creature, every blade of grass, we are kin. There is no one that we do not claim and call our neighbor. So here's what we do at Hennepin, because we believe that's true. We create small groups where people can come and speak their hearts, and people can know them by name, and others can learn and grow in their own discipleship. None of us can do it alone, right? We serve gallons of coffee so that people can gather and share their lives. It's the holy liquid, right? We have classes that teach scripture and spiritual practices, and we have classes that catalyze justice movements, because we are like the Wesleys. This is a beautiful sanctuary. We are called to be people of faith outside these walls, as well as inside. We open our building for 12-step groups to meet. The largest one in the metro area meets here. Did you know that? People come to this church seeking hope and healing. We help families teach their children about God's delight in them and our commitment to walk with them in times that are delightful and in times that are horrible. We gather for worship, to name wonder and praise and lament. We celebrate through the movement of Methodism that we are never alone. We are always in the presence of a God who reaches toward us in love. And we do all of these things because the day will come when we are not going to be in a bounce house having fun. We will come face to face with unnameable pain, each one of us. And building up a practice and building up a way of life and being part of a community that can hold us when we can't even hold ourselves matters. It is life-saving. Listen, this church is a learning laboratory for how to love. It's a great job description, right? That's why we're here. We want to learn how to love. We want to learn how to love God. We want to learn how to love our neighbors, to hear the stories of our neighbors. We want to learn how to love ourselves. Anybody else want to learn that? Come on. In this place, we seek to welcome hearts and minds and bodies and souls. And we want to build connections between us and among us because, like the Apostle Paul, we believe that remembering our immersion in God and the power of our connection to each other, it has the power to save us, to transform our very lives. So I want you to know, if you're here for the first time or you're here every Sunday, this church is not dedicated to creating an idol out of right thinking or belief. This church is about committing to living holy and human love. That's why we're here.